All right, so the news broke on Monday after we got done recording our episode. Bud jumped on and ran through a lot of the candidates, sort of where USC is, the future of recruiting, why things went poorly for Clay Helton. And so now I want to open it up to the entire group because our position for any midseason firing is always very complicated because there are going to be sitting head coaches, especially for a good job like this, whose names are mentioned. And many of them not only are I truly believe like focused on their season, and trying to get to the next game. But how about this week in particular are in like two of the four biggest games of the season with Luke Fickell leading Cincinnati on the road to Indiana, with James Franklin and Penn State hosting Auburn in a whiteout scenario. College football insider extraordinaire Dan Patrick is already on his radio show reading his text messages on air saying there is, quote, mutual interest.
You think?
No shit. Really? Coaches are interested in the USC job?
And so Dennis Dodd turned the attention on a pair of former head coaches who are not working right now, Bob Stoops and Chris Peterson. Before we get this conversation started, the note that I would put for both of those is they are working for Fox Sports, which is based where? In LA. Los Angeles. This is a very, very easy move. If USC wants to do it, it would not be my move if I was the USC athletic director. But how do we see this search playing out? Do you want to play fantasy athletic director and make a suggestion to Mike Bone? I'm just curious to hear where everybody's thoughts are for a process that will continue for literally months, probably before we get a resolution.
I'm not hiring Chris Peterson. And I think Chris Peterson's a very good football coach, but Chris Peterson is more of what you've already had. Like I wrote on Monday, USC needs somebody who knows how to go get the talent and bring all the talent and brings that kind of SEC kind of national title recruiting acumen to the program. That's not Chris Peterson. That's one of the reasons Peterson's gone and they brought in Jimmy Lake, because they were sick of the OKGs. They wanted to bring in more of the 4 and 5 high rated guys. That hasn't worked too well to this point, but still, I don't think Chris Peterson's right for USC. I think we've talked about it a number of times. I don't know who specifically it should be. I think there's a very narrow candidate list of who those guys are that I think would fit well there.
Tom, I have a little bit different take on Peterson, but we're gonna get to the same place. Like, I don't think Washington was tired of Peterson. I think Peterson
was tired. Yeah,
was tired of the recruiting game, and at USC, it's not acceptable to not play the recruiting game. Like you have to understand what recruiting at the highest levels entails, and you have to be okay with it. Like I think a lot of things Peterson did were what USC needs. They need more physicality. They need better attention to detail. They need little things to be taken care of behind the scenes to be more buttoned up. And Clay Helton didn't have all that. But you can't throw the guy in there who's not going to recruit. And it's like, look, we're better now, and ask Florida how that's going. Right.
I mean, that's going to be great for a bunch of 9-3, 10-2 seasons where you get to the Rose Bowl, but you're never going to the playoff.
Can I ask you something about recruiting in general? Because it was one of the reasons I didn't want to get in coaching. It takes up a ton of time, a lot of equity, a lot of ass kissing. And I could not do that for 17 and 18-year-olds. Like, tell them how great they are. And like, hey, come kiss their, I've seen it. And I've seen it in person. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's what you have to do. And it's like, NIL, how much could that change the game for a guy like Chris Peterson, who maybe doesn't like going on the road? A Bob Stoops, who has a part of the game that he didn't like, where all of a sudden, yeah, you got to put in some phone calls, you got to work, and you maybe have to go see a player, but you don't have to call him 4 times a day. You don't have to, make sure you're texting him and, checking in on him every single day. It's here's the bag, it's secured, and it's legit, it's above board. Because I think that was a big reason why USC is where they are, because they got busted. Reggie Bush gets in trouble. They say, oh, this is an embarrassment. We're going to do things the right way. Well, how's that working out? Like, they lost a lot of talent because other teams were saying, no, we'll go ahead. We'll do it. We'll do it the way we've been doing it forever. We'll take that talent. So I just wonder if any coach that's out there that's a former coach that maybe wasn't too into the recruiting would see this as an opportunity to say, you know what? It's not going to be quite the same recruiting game it's always been. Now, definitely, you still have to, even in free agents in the NFL, you still get wined and dined, and you want to see a relationship. But I just wonder if it's going to change to where you don't have to hold their hand from start to finish all the way across the finish line. And there's always the chance you get undercut, or bought out, somebody comes up with a bigger offer. But I just wonder if it's maybe more attractive to some of these coaches who weren't into the recruiting process as much.
I have no idea how that's going to impact it. I think that that's an interesting idea where it could maybe ease a lot of the workload, but I think there's also a possibility it could add more. But I do think like NIL and USC in particular, I think USC could really benefit from the NIL thing, because the fact is, like if you look at Instagram, like all the Instagram influencers, the ones who got the millions of followers and they get a ton of money, where they all live?
LA and Miami.
Yeah. And you're in the entertainment capital of the country, and there's tons of those opportunities there. And like that's where every single agent in the world practically lives. So there's tons of NIL opportunities that I think USC could look to take advantage of with their new head coach. But I do think that whoever it is has to just be 100% hard, coach speak, 110% committed to getting that talent.
I think it's going to be Franklin. I think that's who I think they kind of.
I hear he has mutual interest, Danny.
So you think? I just feel like it's sort of it's like they deserve each other almost. Like Franklin, I think he's showing a little bit of desperation by having these rumors float out there. I think he's always kind of looked at Penn State. I think he's tired of playing second fiddle to Ohio State. There's an opportunity. I think he kind of feels like an LA coach, and they're into that star power. I think he would love nothing more than to go on Jimmy Kimmel and go on every show and to have the TikTok stars out at practice, and he could do a little dance with them. I think he would eat that up. He's incredible on the recruiting trail. I think he would crush it out there. I think you could kind of try to own California. I definitely question some of his coaching acumen, but you get some good coordinators underneath him. I think it just feels like this might be the inevitable move that's made.
I will say that if James Franklin does end up getting the USC job, he better start landing the damn top quarterbacks, considering they're all going to be living within 20 miles of his own campus.
Well, they have 2023 star Malachi Nelson are already committed. So, like, assuming he doesn't bounce, this guy's they already have 2 of our top 4 players in the country committed, I think, for 23. Like, I think Franklin would be a great fit. The guy just wins games.
Yeah.
In some difficult spots. He's the only coach to win at Vandy in any of our lifetimes, pretty much. He took over a very difficult
spot. Yeah,
correct.
Exactly.
He took over a really difficult spot at Penn State after they were going through some of the sanctions stuff. And I wonder if he's really appreciated at Penn State. I think there's a lot of like the kind of existing I'll say weirdos, but like just Joe Pa folks and just like the people who I think there's some thought there in the industry that he's not really all that appreciated at Penn State.
My point, I think it was yesterday on CBS Sports HQ, is that the way that he can be the face of a program, the way that he understands the branding, the marketing, like he took Penn State out of the Joe Pa scandal and the Sandusky scandal. Like he was able to move it in a way that compared to what happened, like we probably should have lingered longer, but he was just like such a force, and he was able to engage that Penn State community and be able to like push this whole thing forward. Like USC should look at that and look at the Vanderbilt success, like you mentioned, and say, if we want to forget the Clay Helton era, go get James Franklin. He will make you like forget, because he is just such a star, to your point, that he can take up a lot of oxygen. And I think that that's what you want, is to give USC fans and that whole community the idea that this is without a doubt a new era. The page has been turned, and it starts, right here with the introductory press conference, which of course James Franklin's going to win.
I think I was going to say, who he wants out, because I think he checked out the moment they won the Big Ten, beat Ohio State, and didn't even sniff the playoffs. I was one of the only ones I remember getting into with Herbstreit. Like, why aren't we even discussing Penn State as an option for the playoffs? Oh, they lost twice. Well, who'd they beat? They beat Ohio State and won the Big Ten championship. I think that was the minute he probably realized, there's a lot more to this. There's optics, there's, history, there's, style points and all this. And I have to go up against that every single year. So like when I say he's desperate to get out of there, I think there's a number of reasons why. Talking about not that appreciated. I think there's legitimate reasons why he would want to leave Penn State.
I think it might have been during the 2020 season when he coached away from his family. Like whatever doubts you had or whatever frustrations you had, as his family was in Florida because of an immune compromised daughter, I believe it is. Like if you're just sitting all alone, going through the grind and like quarantined and going through and as poorly as the Penn State season went last year and all the bad breaks that they had, any negative thoughts that you've got about that job or that setting, it would not surprise me if they were exacerbated by the fact that he was away from his family for the whole year.
I think we've mentioned this before on here when we've like speculated about the USC gig, but it is funny and it is true. I feel like a perfect candidate would be Lane Kiffin. It's just because he's a much better head coach now than he was when he first got the USC job, and he brings the same kind of approach. But I think of other candidates out there. I think Luke Fickell brings a lot of what you want. Like, Bud, you were mentioning the physicality. I think Fickell would definitely bring that back to USC. He obviously focused on recruiting. I think he would do that. It's just all the other stuff, like you were mentioning, like having the TikTok stars and being on Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think that's up Luke Fickell's alley. I don't think he'd be interested in that. I don't think Luke Fickell really, I don't know how interested he is. I know he's got the history with Mike Bowen, but I don't know how interested he's going to be in uprooting his entire family from Ohio, where they've lived their entire lives, and moving them to the West Coast. So I don't know if that's going to play. Why
not Lane Kiffin? If Jennifer Lopez can get back with Ben Affleck, why can't Lane Kiffin go back to USC?
That's about true love, Danny. That's not about nobody's been paying attention to us lately. That's just true love.
But I mean,
clip that.
Right? How many marriages have we seen fall apart and you're like, that was the nastiest divorce you've ever seen? And then give it some time, and then they fall back in love and they ride off into the sunset together. Why can't it work?
I mean, the rationale's there, right? It's like Lane wasn't mature enough for us at the time. He's really changed now. I mean, that's
right. I mean, if you want the best offensive mind out there, he would embrace. I mean, you talk about LA, what they're looking for. Give me the sunglasses. Give me let his hair grow out a little bit longer. Still got that sun bleached hair. Like
he's in good shape now.
Yeah, he's there. He's got history. Like they always want a USC guy. Yeah, I think you could mend those fences.
Photos
you
of
want to
Lane
see him
and
play
Traveler on a yacht together. That's the thing. I don't know defensively that could be, but I think that if they're able to at USC, I feel like Lane Kiffin would be able to recruit the kind of defensive talent to where they could still be solid there. But I honestly, I think it's a good candidate. And if you can get past the history, I think it would make a lot of sense. Another name that's come up that I don't think would get, I wonder what the reaction it would be, but this is the one coach that I feel like reminds me the most of a young Pete Carroll as far as just the energy that they bring. PJ Fleck.
He's on the odds board. I don't know how much value we put in the odds boards as they are, put together on September 14th or whatever. But PJ Fleck was higher on the betting odds board yesterday than I was giving him a shot when I started putting together my handful of candidates.
I mean, like,
could happen for sure.
Because I think that he would bring a more physical style of offense, kind of like what Pete Carroll always loved to do. And I think he's got that same kind of, let's go, kind of rah-rah energy 24/7 that Pete Carroll had, that I think plays well in Southern California, at least better than it does in maybe some other places around the country. So I think that I don't think he's at the top of the list, but I do think he is a name to be considered. Yes.
Don't lose to Colorado this weekend.
Don't lose to Colorado.
Does he keep the tie with the pullover? I don't think you can do that in the Coliseum. That's not the same as doing it at Western Michigan or at Minnesota.